would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please don't hold that against me. Welcome to it, folks. Today is Thursday, August 18th, 2016. We're in the home stretch. I hope the week's going well for everyone. As always, if you'd like to send me a message, you can head on over to www.therebelbroker.com, click on Contact the Rebel Broker, and you'll be able to send me all of your questions, ideas, suggestions, observations, whatever you may have that you'd like to offer, and I will be happy to reply, so please feel free to take advantage of that. While you're there, you can also click the Take the Survey to Support the Show button at the very top. It'll help me grow the show and push it forward and hopefully offer you more. So keep that in mind. You're helping the show. Got a couple of interesting updates for you today. We're going to go ahead and hit the main topic here. The good folks over at Zero Hedge have sort of offered their insights into the 3 red flags that the housing slowdown is accelerating. And we'll see if we can't blend that in with some things that we've already sort of figured out or talked about here on the show and see if that holds any water. Before we do that, though, I wanted to jump in on something we've been covering for a while here. And it's something that I think, in addition to all the other nutty stuff that we've talked about in terms of what's going on with derivatives and banks and how much money they've got in reserve versus what they potentially owe, given the downside of these things, that could potentially really rock our worlds, not just in the real estate sense, but in every other sense as well. One other thing I've talked about is how important employment is, right? You have a healthy real estate market because you have a healthy employment market. And we've talked about other things in terms of inventory and the importance of supply and demand and all those other kinds of things. But really at the core of this problem is the need to have a robust economy that allows folks to earn enough money to qualify to purchase homes, right? And we've talked about some of the things, some of my pet things. Obviously, they're things that kind of interest me. I'm a little bit of a geek when it comes to some of these tech things. And I honestly believe that we are headed for a kind of revolution in employment that would really have to be compared to the Industrial Revolution, where people were suddenly, people who were working in the industry of maintaining a horse and shoeing it, and work on making buggies and all those kinds of things are finding themselves completely replaced by the automobile, right? So it's one of those adapt or sort of wither away sort of prospects, and I really think that we're heading into that kind of a environment. And one of the things that I've used as an example has been automated cars and automated trucks, automated buses, where to the point where the folks who normally drive those things will no longer be needed, to the point where the folks who do things that support the folks who do that will no longer be needed because those folks won't be doing it anymore. And then it'll sort of mushroom across the country as all the various places that were supplying showers and food and rest stops and all that kind of stuff for these people aren't going to be needing to do that anymore, because these vehicles will do it predominantly without the involvement of a human being, making it go from point A to point B. And I've pointed this out, and I've brought up other articles where people were projecting that this is the kind of thing we aren't going to see until 2030, 2040, 2050. And I was arguing that no, I think it's coming a lot faster. I would say 5 to 10 years is what I think. I think the stake in the ground I put a few months ago was 5 to 10 years. And I said I wouldn't be surprised if we saw something by 2020 rather than 2030 or 2040 or 2050. So let's go to today, and the only thing we've really been missing is we've already talked about companies that are doing this. We've talked about the Mercedes, and we've talked about the big truck companies that are doing the 18-wheeler stuff. We've talked about buses in London. We've talked about a lot of things where they're looking to automate these processes. And And a lot of them have been sort of middling solutions where there's still a human being sitting there, but the driving's all being done by a machine. In steps Ford with probably the clearest writing on the wall example of what we see coming. And there's a couple of different interesting perspectives on this one. Ford wants to create, by 2019, autonomous. Okay, so here's one example. Here's one. Now, this is from, let's see, Adafruit, which was taking a story from The Guardian. In this one, by 2019, residents of Columbus could see autonomous shuttles cruising the Easton Commercial District, motion-sensitive LED streetlights that also provide free Wi-Fi internet to the residential neighborhood of Linden, and 175 smart traffic signals that aim to ease traffic jams and speed first responders' paths through the city. So there's one example. It's basically a driverless bus that they're talking about doing. In another story that's being quoted by the folks at Zero Hedge, the company said it plans to have a fully autonomous vehicle. And let's define what that means according to Ford. That means no steering wheel, no gas or brake pedals, available by 2021. So by the year 2021, they're expecting to have this thing going, where there won't even be any mechanism to do driving manually, and it'll be a ride-hailing service. So you wouldn't necessarily own this thing. It would be a thing that you call for or request. Maybe you take out your phone, you say, I'm ready to go to work, and one of these things shows up. Chief Executive Officer Mark Fields said today, quote, "We see the autonomous car changing the way the world moves once again. They address a whole host of safety, social, and environmental issues." And I think that sums up exactly why this stuff is going to be put on the express train to completion, whereas other folks have been saying, oh, you know, the bureaucracy will hold this back. Absolutely not. If anything, the bureaucracy will more or less bow back and allow this stuff. The story goes on to say, like Alphabet Inc.'s Google, Ford will skip the interim step of driver-assisted technology as a way to evolve toward full autonomy. It's planned to deploy self-driving cars in ride-hailing and ride-sharing fleets is similar to what General Motors Company aims to do with Lyft. Ford's 2021 scheduled start matches BMW's ambitious time frame. Quote, "We believe in our plan that taking the driver out of the loop is really important," Fields said in an interview with Bloomberg Television. The automaker couldn't find a sensible way through the no man's land, determining exactly when a robotic car should try to re-engage a human driver in an emergency. Now, there have been a couple of interesting reactions to this. I think one of them should be a understanding that this is an acceleration of this process compared to what folks have been saying out in the world. It's right on par with what I've been telling you is likely to happen relating to this technology. So if you've been calibrating yourself more on what I've been suggesting, I think you're probably right on the mark. So they're talking fully autonomous, no controls in it vehicles by 2021. What do you think we'll get in the intervening 5 years? You can bet that you are going to see an accelerated platform for getting autonomous driving cars that have controls. Because this no controls thing would have been an endpoint, right? That's a milestone that's gigantic. And remember, all of these technologies feed off of one another. You're not in a situation where you're separately developing the software that's going to help a truck drive across the country versus a car driving in a city. The algorithms, the learned experiences of how to manage different traffic situations. This is all going to be shared. As I've said before, the problems that will be solved with this technology are not hardware. You're not going to find that people need to build a new car to make it drive better in an autonomous way. It's strictly going to be a software update. So this technology can not only get developed initially very, very easily in terms of its hardware and software, but then it can mature without you ever changing any physical thing on the vehicle. So I think this is on an accelerated plan. I think we're likely to see this more and more. And I frankly think that this is something that is going to have a huge effect on how things move across the country. The cost savings absolutely offset any costs relating to replacing automated trucks. So this is something I think we need to be interested in, and I think that we also need to understand that this high level of acceptance of automation is going to bleed over into tons of other things. There have been articles about whether or not your job is the type of job that's going to get replaced by automation. We've already talked about how some fast food restaurants are whittling down the number of human beings who need to be in a location to pretty much one, just to simply be there in case anything goes absolutely completely nuts. We've already seen the person at the front counter is no longer going to be needed. That's going to be automated in plenty of stores very, very soon. And with the minimum wage requirements that have been put into place that are supposed to go into effect by 2020, you can bet that's going to be the standard way things run from now on. In terms of what's going on in the kitchen, there's tons of technology. We talked about a show specifically for fast food restaurants where the big topic was all these automated systems on how to prepare food. And imagine that mushrooming, right? I'm giving you some specific examples, but then imagine how an acceptance of that philosophy and these first ones that do it will be big test grounds, how accepting are people of automated systems that provide services. Then I think the floodgates will open up wide simply because so much of the hardware involved in this automation is going to be easily translatable into other disciplines and things that folks need to get done. So keep that in mind. I mean, for you personally, if you're someone who works in an industry that you think could be easily automated, I think it'd be very smart for you to consider expanding your area of knowledge into other areas that aren't as easy to automate. So keep all this stuff in mind. I think this represents a big economic shift for everyone, and it could have an absolutely gigantic effect on how we see day-to-day life in just about every city across the country. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we're going to go ahead and jump right into those 3 red flags. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right, aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner-broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408-852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I tell you, I think we're in for some big things in a relatively short period of time. That could really rock the kind of life that we live. That can completely change the dynamics of how we do things. And this level of automation is really something amazing. But we'll cover that as different stories present themselves in terms of showing off what's happening, what progress is being made there. But once it hits, I think it's going to go into high gear, and I suspect it's going to be tough to slow down. And I hope that folks can be mentally and intellectually prepared for it so that they're able to transition into something that is maybe a little bit more automation proof. All right, so let's talk a little about these 3 red flags. This is an article from Zero Hedge. Oh, and of course, the articles relating to the automation I discussed earlier will be linked in the show notes. So if you'd like to check those out, you can head on over to www.therebelbroker.com. Just click on the latest. Find the latest show will be at the top of the list. Just go ahead and click Read More, and you will be able to see the list of articles that we're linking to. Now, the article we're talking about today is the 3 red flags that the U.S. housing slowdown is accelerating. And we can sort of blend this in with things we've already talked about. We've already noticed things have flattened a little bit. We've seen a dramatic decrease in the number, well, not dramatic, just recently a 4% decrease in the number of mortgage applications, despite the fact we've continued to see lower interest rates. But we've also are seeing that this is easy to explain with lack of inventory in so many places. For instance, Sacramento, one of those marketplaces I like to look to as sort of a bellwether. Inventories are down 10%, sales are down 7%. So you can focus on one of those two numbers. That 7% seems perfectly explainable by the reduction in the amount of inventory that's in there. Other numbers you'd want to look at is how long are these properties on the marketplace. Those are ways to tell really an additional way of kind of figuring out what's going on with that marketplace. If this starts to get blended with dramatic increases in the amount of time properties are staying on the market, well, then we're starting to see a shift in that supply and demand equation. And clearly something's going on where buyers aren't jumping in and buying things as quickly as they're listed. But let's go ahead and focus on these red flags that the folks at Zero Hedge are talking about. The first red flag, was a report by real estate advisory Realty Track, which cited by Bloomberg, said, quote, almost 9 years after the housing market bust helped trigger the most recent recession, Realty Track Senior Vice President Darren Bloomquist sees the industry waving a red flag. Now, in that, he was referring to house flipping by third-party investors at auction, which was back with a vengeance. And what's worse, the share of foreclosures snapped up by inexperienced mom-and-pop buyers at auction had hit a record 31% in June. As he said, quote, this is a redux of the same fervent speculation that pushed the housing bubble. So I think this is an interesting number to talk about, the fact that there's such a huge number of really less savvy folks jumping in and doing this, because they do make a good point. One of the big milestones in the downturn last time was folks who were doing flipping, and they were being successful less because they were flipping smartly and more because market momentum was really carrying them into profit. They could take these properties and do relatively little to them, if anything. Remember, back in those days, folks were flipping and not even doing anything to the properties. There were circumstances where you would be in escrow with the property you were planning to flip. You would get into contract with someone to buy it from you right after close of escrow. And in some cases, your escrow would be scheduled to close 5 minutes after the escrow you're currently in, and you had done nothing to the property. Nothing had been done, but you were going to be pocketing a quick $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. Now, that was happening. So it was less a savvy investor and more just the luckiest boob on the planet who happened to be buying at a time when property values were going through the roof. If your investment strategy is based entirely on market momentum, you need to be a really lucky person, because there's always the point where that momentum dwindles. And if you don't time it right, you end up losing money rather than making money. So yes, this level of increased speculation on the part of very inexperienced investors is a concern. It's going to depend a lot on how these folks are buying. Are these folks buying with mostly cash, or are they financing huge chunks of this stuff? That would be more of a concern for me. I'd want to know how these things are being financed, because remember, back then you were still able to leverage these crazy loans at the same time. I'm not seeing that being the case here. And I'm not minimizing this. I'm simply sort of tracking it a little bit to point out that when folks are not buying it to be owner occupied, there are different rules that are tending to apply here that weren't being applied last time around. It was pretty much whatever you said was taken as gospel, and there was no verification or any of these other types of things that were going on. So I think keep that in mind. Next, despite the fact we're talking about 31% of the foreclosures that were being snapped up by inexperienced mom and pop buyers, we have to understand that foreclosures are also at the lowest point they have been. They're back. The last time we checked on foreclosures, they were back at the normal pre-drop levels, which indicates to me that, and granted, that's where we were that led up to this, but you needed a lot more time. This needed to percolate a lot longer. So remember, we had this whole crazy lending thing was really about 10 years old by the time it got to a head. So we had stored up 10 years worth of this kind of crazy buying, this kind of crazy financing, and it grew in popularity. Its levels started to go through the roof until we were seeing far more demand on the part of buyers. That's what created all the growth in prices, was this escalated level of demand. I'm not sure I'm seeing an interesting crossover as they are between the increase in inexperienced mom and pop buyers, but I'm not seeing the volume yet. And that would have to accumulate over several years to sort of put us in the same position that we were before. So red flag number one, not so much a red flag I would worry about today, particularly given how statistically insignificant the numbers we're talking about here are. Not insignificant in terms of the percentage of folks that are mom and pops, but insignificant in terms of the fact that that foreclosures represent a very small number of the marketplace right now. And that over the course of years, this would be a bigger concern after this has been going on for a while. But sales volume is so relatively low that I don't see this as the huge red flag. It's a yellow flag for me. It's like, okay, keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on the number of mom and pops, inexperienced investor types that are jumping into this, because that's absolutely a much higher level of risk. But I'd want to know what sort of financial instruments they're using to achieve these goals. I'm guessing it's not 100% loans. If it is, I want to find out how they're doing it, because supposedly the rules are in place now where if this isn't if you're being honest in your application and you're saying you're not going to live in it, this is an investment property, it's different rules than it was before. So I'm not sure they're comparing quite exactly as you'd like to see them compare those two things. Next, the second warning, according to the article, came as a result of the latest sharp decline in spending on furniture and home goods stores, which, according to Bank of America credit and which, according to Bank of America credit and debt card spending data, showed that the year-over-year drop had reached the lowest since the recessionary period. As B of A said then, this shows the consumers have delayed spending on housing-related items, which could be a sign of weakness for the housing market. So I'll be honest, I'm not 100% sure of the point they're trying to make here, other than that we saw a move of this kind at the same time last time. A sharp decline in spending on furniture and home goods is supposed to communicate that consumers have delayed spending on housing-related items. I guess I tend to think that you tend to see furniture and home goods being purchased right after folks buy, right? And there was an awful lot of buying going on. So I'm not real sure of the cause and effect on that one. Is a reduced spending on housing-related items a sign of weakness for the housing market? I'm not so sure. And I'm not so sure that the decline then can be explained by the same circumstances as a potential decline now. Simply because what do we know about the market as it exists today, which is different from before? Nobody is able to find anything to freaking buy. We've got way more people wanting to buy than we have people wanting to sell. We had far more people wanting to sell before. So the idea that there's just a lot less. And remember, we've seen decreases in inventory over the last year. We've seen decreases in inventory and number of sales, but we've seen increases in prices, which would explain why we've seen year over year a decrease in housing-related items. People have not bought homes for which to put their housing items in, right? Does that make sense? Am I missing something? I don't know if there's a phrase in here, a code word, some magical mojo that I'm not clued into, but this seems fairly easily explainable given today's circumstances, and I'm thinking that it is not related to these same circumstances that may have caused this the first time around. So, second red flag. I'm not even sure I'd make it a flag. Maybe a handkerchief. And maybe not red. Maybe a nice violet, because I don't think it's something you need to get horribly worried about. The third red flag was revealed in the then latest Credit Suisse survey of real estate agents. I'm not a fan of surveys of real estate agents. Let's continue. Quote, our buyer traffic index took a sizable step back in June, slipping from 41 to 52 in May, indicating traffic levels decidedly below agents' expectations. Prospective buyers also continue to be deterred by a persistent shortage of affordable inventory across markets, with agents frequently highlighting buyer pushback to rising home prices. On the other hand, agents repeatedly mentioned that low mortgage rates were crucial to supporting demand. So, let's put one thing to bed right here. And I hate to even say this because I always get mail. 80% of real estate agents are not people who I would listen to relating to data like this. So there's that. Now, are there some nuggets that we can pull out of this? Yeah, but they're nuggets we already kind of know. Our buyer traffic index took a sizable step back in June. Okay, across the country. Did I see a reduction in buyer traffic? Yeah. Was it enough to offset the multiple offer situation? No. It just means that instead of getting 12 offers, there were 4. And traffic levels are always below agents' expectations. I guarantee you that if you survey any bunch of real estate, just take a random sample of real estate agents, survey them about what's going to happen in the future, and the majority of them will give you expectations that you can't even explain with current data or past data. It will always be, the story will always be, in several months, homes will be more expensive. In several months, there will be more buyers. You will always hear the story that pushes the narrative that you should buy now because it'll be more expensive later, or there'll be fewer houses later, or whatever. At least that's what I tend to hear. And nothing annoys me more. So there are these things called broker tours that I'm sure you've probably heard of. For those of you who have sold your homes, you've probably had to have one done at your house. And basically, while all the honest people are off at their offices working for a living, real estate brokers arrange someday during the work week, usually from something like 9 or 10 a.m. till 11 a.m., for the broker's tour, which is when a brand new home is put on the market, or maybe not. It depends on how the listing agent handled it. But in any event, the listing agent has submitted their brand new listing or a listing that's been around for a while to be part of the broker tour, so that after all of the real estate agents get together and eat donuts and drink coffee at some central location, they then go on a caravan after that and go look at all the homes on the tour. That is a broker tour. And I'm sure there are areas where these broker tours are great, and the folks who end up looking at these houses are big players in the markets. And then there's other places where it seems most of the agents who show up are the ones who don't have clients anyway. But the reason I went off on this little tangent is because this is where I overhear or participate in conversations where I start talking about the market with other agents and come and I walk away thinking, what the hell are these people thinking? Do I come across folks who absolutely seem well-informed, folks who actually sound like they're paying attention? Sure. It does happen from time to time, but less than 20% of the time. So anytime if I'm going to throw up a red flag, it sure as hell isn't going to be because of a survey of agents. That might be a thing. It might be, it's like the yellow light on your dashboard. Yeah, okay, there may be something wrong. Let me check it. Or maybe I thump it with my finger and it goes out. That might inspire me to go and look at what is making that light go off. But by and large, I'm not basing big decisions on what I might randomly get from folks who are willing to fill out a survey of real estate agents. So I'm not even going to suggest we change any colors at all based on that particular indicator, because basically it's all of the data that's in that statement are things we already knew, right? We've talked about this data before. We understand this. But the next step that we have to understand is that these things are also very explainable in ways that don't indicate to us that somehow there's an acceleration of the slowdown. So what do we learn anything from these red flags? Maybe a little bit from that first one in terms of an increase in the number of mom and pops who are participating. Again, I'd want data on how they're participating. I get that they hit a new record of 31% in terms of the foreclosures that are out there, but how were they purchased? Were these all cash purchases? If so, I don't have a problem with that. I'm okay with that. That's actually fine with me. I don't see a downside from these folks acquiring it with all cash. Are there financial instruments involved? If there are, I want to know about it. What are they? And then the second one, in terms of furniture goods being bought or not bought, I think we've explained that fairly well. Should we be concerned that there is if we blend this with the other things we've talked about, the slowdown in mortgages, which again can be explained by the slowdown or the reduction in inventory overall in most marketplaces. But the key here to take away is, are we seeing a slowdown? Well, let's look at the real data. Let's look at the data that actually has a little bit more impact. Yeah, you know what? We seem to be. I'm starting to see homes staying on the market a little bit longer. I'm starting to see homes not sell as much over asking price as they once did. I'm seeing fewer offers coming in on a per property basis. I'm actually seeing properties that interest me that stay on the market for more than 2, 3, 4 weeks. And that's just been over the last few weeks. I've started to notice that trend. So is there a slowdown in my marketplace? Absolutely. I think that and right now I would continue to describe it as a flattening. But let's remember, I live in crazy town in terms of Silicon Valley. What does that mean for the rest of the marketplace? Well, you know what? Only you know for sure, and only if you're paying attention to what's going on with your local numbers. My guess would be that this is more of a national thing. Now, let me try to blend in other areas I'm paying attention to, such as Las Vegas, Nevada, Prescott, Arizona, Denver, Colorado, Miami, Florida. These are all areas that, using tools that aren't even real estate agent specific tools, I'm talking stuff like Realtor.com, Zillow, Trulia, places where I can kind of keep track of stuff. I'm finding that homes are staying on the market for extended periods of time. When I go and I look at places in Prescott, Arizona, which is not a hotbed. I mean, it's west of Phoenix, so it's not a huge metro area. But I'm seeing properties that have been on the market 60, 70, 90 days. Some of them even longer than that. So, and that's something that even in that marketplace seems to be longer than it was just a year ago. Miami, we've already talked about Miami. We've seen dramatic changes in the luxury market in Miami, and we've seen sort of a trickle-down effect or maybe not as a cause and effect relationship, but we've definitely seen a slowdown in terms of the general activity in that marketplace. I'm seeing it here in my area. Denver, I really don't have great data on that. All I have there is what the Realtor.com site kind of hints at, and that still seems to be relatively robust. But again, it feels like it's slowing. It feels like we're in a marketplace there where things are not quite as hectic as they once were. I'd love for the listener who was sending me some information before to give me an update. How are things going? This was someone who was deciding to rent because there were all these incentives to rent an apartment, so you could rent an apartment for very reasonable rates, but purchasing was almost impossible. Homes were tending to sell before they even went on the MLS. That's how fast things were going. And obviously not going on the MLS means it's not going to show up on Realtor.com, so it's hard for me to get any kind of insights there. But I do see more properties appearing to show up on the MLS, which indicates that whole pocket listing, sell it without putting on the MLS thing isn't working out for all of these various realtors and brokers out there. So that tells me things must be slowing down a little bit. If I'm wrong, that's kind of an educated guess, but if I'm wrong, I'd love for someone to reach out and give me the heads up on that one. All right, folks, I think that covers it for today. I do appreciate you making the show a part of your daily routine. That's how the show grows, and you all have been so supportive. The show is growing at far better clip than I could have hoped for. So thank you very much for that. And as always, thanks for listening, and I'll talk to y'all next time.